PilotSafety.org is a volunteer group dedicated to reducing general aviation accidents and providing free and low-cost training and safety resources for pilots. Our speaker today is Gary Reeves. Gary has over 6,000 hours, is an ATP and a master flight, instrument, and multi-engine instructor. He is a young Eagles flight leader for the EAA. And a nationally recognized expert in Garmin avionics, IFR, iPad use, and mountain flying. In 2016, Gary was awarded the FAA Instructor of the Year for the Western Pacific region, which includes Arizona, California, Hawaii, and Nevada. There are 112,000 instructors in the U.S. Less than 800 have ever been named Master. California only has 13. Please welcome 2016 Western Pacific Regional Instructor of the Year and Master CFI Gary Reeves.
And since this is a recording of a class, we'll just pretend lots of people clapped. So this is very much an intro class. In just 2 hours, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff. I'm going to cover stuff much faster than people can learn it. This is not a how to use it and poof, you're now a ForeFlight expert and safe to fly with it. That's not true. We're going so fast that you need to realize that moving fast is not the same as getting somewhere. This is a demonstration of what ForeFlight can do. You need formal training, one-on-one, hands-on in flight before you fly any glass cockpit plane, and that includes ForeFlight. We do have some basic class rules. Number one, you should not ask me about the Fight Club or talk about Garmin, WingX, or Android devices. If you send me an email and ask me about Garmin Pilot, WingX, or Android, I know nothing. I'm sure they're great. I've never used them. I don't intend on using them. Not my gig. I'm a national recognized expert on certain things. Garmin avionics. I travel all over the US and Canada and teach people in their planes at their airport how to use Garmin. G1000, 430, GTN. If somebody from California calls me up and says, Gary, I have a Cirrus, I'm like, wrong guy. Because they typically have the Avidine panel and I don't know anything about those. I'm really great and a nationally recognized expert on FlyQ and ForeFlight. I know nothing about any of the other programs. And that's part of the trick on becoming an expert, is you can't be great at too many different things. I do have a request during the class, just put your iPhone or iPad on airplane mode. You will not be using it at all except for one time. I'll go very, very slow and we're going to do a hands-on exercise that I want you to follow along with me. During the rest of the time, this is a very fast-paced lecture. Just put it down and enjoy the show. This really is only a beginning, and you will get much more out of it if you don't try and follow along on your iPad and you don't try and take notes. If you're good with that, let's go ahead and move on. Now, don't forget, as a super bonus, if you stay and don't take notes and don't play with your iPad on the Santa's official good list, you can again review this video anytime you want. So let's start out with some basic definitions. ADS-B, or Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, is a way of saying this is the stuff that the FAA can automatically send to you if you have the right external GPS, and you can get free traffic and free weather, which is way better than spending money on an XM subscription. Downloads, that's stuff like maps and terminal charts and instrument approach plates that are stored on your computer. And that is the key word, stored in the memory. You don't need internet to get to them. An EFB, or an electronic flight bag, is any handheld device. Android, iPad, handheld GPS, anything that is a collection of maps and navigational data. An external GPS is additional equipment that you really have to get the most out of ForeFlight or any iPad program. Now, flight notifications, these are only available in the Pro subscription, but this is stuff where you can actually get information directly to your iPad, like IFR clearances. You can open and close flight plans. You can get severe weather alerts directly through the program, both in flight and pre-flight if you have the right technology. That's Geo-referenced, and that's what makes these things cool, is you get a little blue moving airplane that moves up the map. Pretty hard to get lost if you got a little blue moving airplane going up a Victor Airway. Hazard advisor is the ForeFlight term for terrain awareness. It's very similar. Layers, that's stuff you can overlay on the map, and you can lay so many things on the map that it's hard to see. Primary navigation, this is an FAA term, and what it means is you're using this to fly the plane. Remember, you may never, ever, ever use a handheld device as your primary form of navigation, except for one specific circumstance, and we'll talk about that. So the primary form of navigation is always pilotage. You look outside the window and identify landmarks, and then you back it up and make sure you're correct by looking at ForeFlight. It's never the other way around. Track log is you can actually get a GPS recording of your flight, and we'll talk about that. And synthetic vision is the cool video game. It looks exactly like a G1000 with synthetic vision. It's a way you can completely not look outside. Now remember, it's illegal to use this as your primary form of navigation on any handheld device, including ForeFlight, except, and I'll talk about that. So why are Androids and iPads and WingX and ForeFlight and FlyQ and Garmin, why are all these things great? Because it's hard to keep current with paper. If you remember, any VFR product, like a terminal chart, is going to change every 6 months, and every time they change, the FAA makes an average of 100 changes. Sectionals are VFR, they change every 6 months, and the FAA makes an average of 278 changes. And this is not useless stuff. Airport tower frequencies change, airspaces change. This is important stuff. You need current information. Now, the Airport Facilities Directory is actually an IFR product. That means it changes every 56 days, and a whopping 825 changes. You're required to have current information with you at all times, so that means if you have an AFD that's out of date and you get in trouble, the FAA is coming after you. Terminal procedures and low altitude maps. If you add up all these changes, there's an average of 1,361 changes every time they clean through a cycle, which means you need to buy a lot of paper charts, or Sporty's actually has a pretty cool subscription service. So let's talk about the FAA requirements. This is the one that always gets people in trouble, 91-103. Each pilot in command, before starting the engine, must become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. So, can ForeFlight or electronic flight bags, including WingX, FlyQ, and all those others, legally replace paper charts, approach plates, and an AFD? Well, in 1997, the head lawyer for the FAA wrote out an opinion. First of all, you're probably not required to carry a paper chart. 91-503 specifically says only the pilot in command of large and multi-engine airplanes have to carry charts. So if you're flying a Cessna 182, you're not required to carry a paper chart, except if you're going through a special flight rules area. They went on to say that it's not FAA policy to initiate enforcement action against a pilot for having an old chart or no chart, because remember, you're not required to have the things unless you fly larger multi-engine airplanes or going through special flight rules. Yep, you got it right. FAA pulls up to you and says, "Hi, ramp check. Can we see your state ID, your pilot certificate, your instructor certificate if you have one, your medical certificate, an airworthiness, a registration, an operating handbook, and a weight and balance?" They will never, ever ask you to see a chart because you're not required to have it and they can't. It has nothing to do with anything. You're not required to have it, most likely. Therefore, they can't even ask you for it on a ramp check. So let's talk about handheld devices like ForeFlight. Well, the issue of current chart databases and handheld GPS is a non-issue because the FAA never regulates handheld devices. The FAA will never allow an iPad or any handheld GPS to be used as primary navigation in VFR or IFR, except for one specific instance because they cannot control them. Exactly how would the FAA inspect 20 million iPads? They can't. Therefore, it will never be okay to do primary navigation using a handheld device, except for one instance, and I promise we'll talk about it. So, since they don't regulate them, they don't really care if they're current or non-current. Feel better? But wait, there's always a catch. If an out-of-date chart, no chart, or an out-of-date database in a handheld device contributed to an airspace violation, an accident, or anything else that causes an FAA investigation, it will be an additional penalty and count even more against you. That's right, you're not required to have a chart or a current database in ForeFlight. However, if you violate airspace and you can't show you had a current chart or a current database, it's an additional penalty and will count even more against you. So remember, is paper required? No. But you must have all available current information, 91-103, before you begin a flight. Well, the problem is buying paper charts is hard. I will bet anybody $20. Email me, GaryR@pilotsafety.org. Email me the $20 in cash. I'll hold on to it. If you think the FAA will even produce paper charts by 2020, because I don't think they're going to. Jeppesen in Europe is no longer printing paper charts. I don't think the FAA is going to print paper charts in the next 4 years. I think they're going to stop. Many pilot shops are going out of business because they relied on paper chart sales. In fact, pilot shops in Arizona are actually being replaced with just vending machines. So it's really getting even harder to keep paper current. Nice thing about ForeFlight and other electronic flight bags, they can be updated anywhere and anytime, as long as you got some internet. Well, what about the practical test standards? That's soon to be replaced by an ACS, Airman Certification Standards, but everybody on the planet is pretty familiar with the PTS. This is what people receive their certification from. And let's look at the private pilot PTS, and you'll notice that to pass the private pilot PTS, and what the FAA will always look for most, is that you are great at these 15 things. So let's pick a couple. Let's talk about number 4, collision avoidance. Is it easier to avoid a mid-air collision with a paper chart or a moving map that shows traffic? Well, ForeFlight's better. Is it easier not to accidentally cross a runway with a paper map or a geo-referenced electronic map that warns you before you cross a runway? Ding, the iPad wins again. What's more accurate flight planning? A paper map with a pencil, a slightly warped plotter, and an old E6B, or a computer? The computer is always, always, always more accurate, which makes you safer, if and only if you are trained and know how to use it well. Any electronic flight bag, including ForeFlight, is actually more dangerous when people don't know how to use it than the old paper charts. About staying clear of TFRs and restricted airspace, a nice little blue moving airplane or a paper chart? Ding, iPad. Reducing pilot workload and improving cockpit organization. When you've got traffic, weather, and everything on one thing, an iPad, or folded up 5 sectional charts, paper flight plans and notes. Obviously, the iPad's better. Electronic flight bags like the iPad with ForeFlight make everything better and safer if and only if you know how to use them and are professionally trained. ADS-B traffic alerts help with collision avoidance. Taxi diagrams help prevent runway incursions. The more information you have, the less likely you are to enter a dangerous situation, and it helps you make better decisions. Geo-referencing during flight helps you avoid TFRs in special use airspace, and the more info you have, the better you are organized. So the magic question that all flight instructors ask me everywhere I go all over the US and Canada is, can my students use ForeFlight on check ride? Absolutely. The answer is always yes. If, and there's a but, if you can show that that program has current charts, DPEs must legally accept that, including for flight planning and navigation during the check ride. But they will always turn it off about 5 minutes into the flight to see what your backup plan is. All of my students always carry backup paper charts with the duplicate flight planning already done. Or if you're a smart aleck like me, I just pull out my iPhone 6 and go, meh, now what? Either one's correct. Is training really needed? Well, let's talk about a G1000. I think you're all pretty familiar with the G1000 cockpit system. It's a pretty complex system. You can do flight planning on it. You get geo-referenced maps. You've got taxi diagrams. You've got weather. And it'll even show traffic. So let me ask you a question. As instructors, or even just as pilots, would you give the keys to a pilot that had never flown a G1000 and just let him take off? No? Why not? Well, what if that pilot had taken 1 to 2 wings classes or seminars, a couple hours long, just like this, had looked at the quick start guide, played with it in flight a couple times to see how it works? Now would you give them the keys and let them just fly off on their own? No, of course not. G1000s, when you're not properly trained, are more dangerous than the good old-fashioned steam gauges. Well, ForeFlight is a complex glass panel system that is harder to learn than the G1000. I volunteer for pilot safety, and I'm happy to do it. What I do for a living is people hire me all over the US and Canada to come to them and teach them how to fly their brand new Garmin avionics planes like a G1000, or teach them instrument flying on the G1000. Or people hire me all over the US and Canada to come to them and teach them in 1 or 2 days, 8 to 16 hours of training, how to really use ForeFlight safely. I gotta tell you, it takes everybody longer to learn ForeFlight than it does a G1000 system with an autopilot, because ForeFlight does more things. There are more buttons, widgets, and gadgets in ForeFlight than G1000 could ever add. So ForeFlight is more complicated, and that means you have to get hands-on training in flight and on the ground before you go do it. Would you let a pilot take off at night in unfamiliar area in a plane using ForeFlight if they'd taken 1 to 2 wings classes like this, looked at a quick start guide, played with it in flight a couple times to see how it works? No. And that's the answer we're always looking for. Okay, so let's talk about plans and prices. And this is as of February 2016. So ForeFlight now has 2 different subscription models. One is a basic for $99 a year, and that includes most of the stuff, including taxi charts and instrument approach plates, the new logbook. You can do weight and balance, and it'll connect to Garmin avionics if you buy a lot of expensive accessories. But what I tell people is, everybody, you just got to get the ForeFlight Pro because it makes it useful. Now, all of the taxi charts, all of the instrument approach plates are geo-referenced too. You can even overlay the instrument approach plate on the map. You get the hazard advisor, which is a terrain awareness system. You get a profile view, which helps with terrain. And you get a full synthetic vision AHARS that is better than the G1000 When can you really use an iPad as your primary form of navigation? The only time you can, if you haven't guessed it yet, is during an emergency. What kills people at night and kills people in IMC is not really the vacuum failure. That's annoying. What kills people at night and kills people in instruments condition is an electrical failure. You're flying along at night or IMC and your panel goes dark. Now you have no radio and you have no form of navigation at all. You're literally flying blind. You don't even know where you are anymore. And this is the time ForeFlight Pro will save your life, and it's cheap insurance, because you can use a handheld device anytime you just say the words Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Now here's the cool thing. You've got a radio failure because you have no electrical power. You can just mumble it to yourself. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Hey, you declared an emergency. Now you can do whatever you want. All of my instrument training classes and all of my ForeFlight boot camps require people with a completely dark panel to shoot an instrument approach only using ForeFlight with synthetic vision, and they're amazed at how they can do it with just a little bit of practice. The other thing you get, which is great, is that flight notifications. Flight notifications means you can open and close flight plans directly from the iPad. You can get your instrument clearance before you even call for it, and you get all kinds of in-flight alerts, and that's what you really want. So everybody, if you're going to pay for ForeFlight, get the Pro version. That's my strong thing. I do understand that $200 a year is a little much for some people. So how about if I just give you 33% off? That's what you do. You go over to safepilots.org. Sorry again, that's safepilots.org. That's a flight instructor group primarily called the Society of Aviation and Flight Educators. You do not have to be an instructor to join. And you're going to join for $45 per year. Now, that gives you huge value just by itself. You get really cool newsletters. Hey, I write one of the monthly columns. You get magazines, electronic magazines. You get all these tips and tricks. You can download lesson plans. And you get discounts on stuff, like 33% off ForeFlight. So if you had a $200 subscription and you took 33% off, even after you join ForeFlight, even if you don't use it for anything else, you're still going to save $20. So it's absolutely worth it. Now, after you've bought the ForeFlight subscription, you're probably going to need some stuff to show it on. So let's talk about a 64 gig comparison of some quick Apple devices. You can run it on stuff as low as 32 gigabytes. You can try on 16 gig. But honestly, it's a big program, and the more memory and the newer the device, the faster things work. One thing my dad taught me early in life is if you buy the most expensive, fastest, biggest computer you can, you'll make your money back very quickly, because you don't want to waste time waiting for things to spool up. When you're flying along at 120 knots, you don't want to wait for things to buffer and load. So try and get the 64 gigabyte if you can. An iPhone 6 is $650. That's, of course, if it's cash pay. No sales, no rebates, and not if you're signing up for 2 years with AT&T. 6 Plus, again, $749. An iPad Air, there's two versions of the iPad Air 2. One is Wi-Fi only for $599, and another is $729, which comes with a cellular data capability. And then the Mini 4, which is what I carry, is either $499 or $629 with the cellular data. Now you're going to have a monthly bill with the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. If you buy a Wi-Fi only iPad Air 2 or iPad Mini, you have to buy the external GPS. You have no choice. Or you might get one with the cellular data capability. There's a free internal assisted GPS built in. I don't like them. They don't work well over 8,000 feet. And they never work well if you lose the signal, because it's a real GPS. People say it's not a real GPS. If you buy an iPad Mini or an iPad Air 2 and it's got the cellular data capability, even if you don't sign up for Verizon, AT&T, or Sprint or whatever, it does have a real GPS in it, but it's an assisted GPS that has to talk to a couple cell phone towers before it can find its initial position. That's why I just think you should get the external GPS anyway. If you do want to pay the monthly bill, that's great, because you could, flight plan from anywhere But every FBO I go into has Wi-Fi, so don't worry about it. So Wi-Fi works great. If you are running cellular and you leave the cellular data on, it will very quickly drain in flight, especially in the flight levels. It'll drain a full battery down to nothing in about 45 minutes because it's constantly talking to a lot of cell phone towers and searching for signals. I like the Mini. I think it fits better on my knee, and I actually have a place for it where my 206 is actually panel mounted. iPad Air is great, just a little big for me. You really are going to need an external GPS if you want the best, most reliable signal. Bad Elf and Dual will sell you something that works pretty good for about $100. Or you can buy the nice Stratus 2 ADS-B GPS for $900. If you don't have an external GPS and you're relying on the built-in GPS in cell phones or the built-in GPS in certain iPad models, you really will come across this screen one time when you need it most. Now, the other thing you're going to need, the big problem we have in the Southwest US, is particularly with the greenhouse planes. The greenhouse bubble planes are what I call Diamond Stars, Cirrus, Grumman's, Columbias, all super cool planes, helicopters, all super cool aircraft, but there's a glass bubble and no shade. And iPads very quickly overheat, sometimes in as little as 30 to 40 minutes. So there's a company called Xnot, and I want you to take a minute and write this website down. Xnot.com. Go ahead and write that down. This is a patent pending, amazing thing. They're not cheap, but it goes on the Mini or the iPad cooling case, and it comes with a knee board strap or RAM mount where you can put it where I put it on my panel in the plane. And a private pilot developed this in Long Beach and said, "Gary, would you try it out?" And I'm, "Yeah, sure, whatever, it's not going to work." So I put it up on the glare shield, glass side out, running ForeFlight and FlyQ on maximum brightness with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on, and I let it just sit there, bake in the sun for an hour on an 85-degree day. Then I took it down and figured it would be overheated and turned off, and nope, it was still running both programs and didn't even glitch. The glass was kind of warm to the touch, but the iPad itself was cool enough to complete and just keep going. They're amazing, and you can get more information on these things at xnot.com. Now, if you're flying a Cessna and it's panel mounted and it's totally out of the sun, you may not need one of these things. But if you're flying the greenhouse bubble critters, I really, really recommend it. And yeah, if you got just bags of cash laying around, you should buy that Stratus 2 for $900 because it gives you ADS-B, which is FAA data inbound to your plane. It doesn't broadcast your position out. It does not meet the 2020 ADS-B mandate. You're just getting information in, and you're getting part-time information, especially traffic. So if you're in that Cessna, you don't see traffic around you. You see traffic around the ADS-B out airplane above you. Notice you don't see that Pilatus coming up behind your tail because he's not in range of the plane. So ADS-B traffic requires a couple things. You get ADS-B traffic from a ground tower if your aircraft or one really close to you within about 3 miles is ADS-B out transmitting and you're talking to the towers. So flying in Long Beach, I get really good traffic because I'm surrounded by JetBlue and American and Delta and Gulfstreams and all these critters with ADS-B out. When I fly out of my home in Big Bear on the right, I don't ever get traffic because no one near me has that ADS-B out. So for $900, yes, you get ADS-B traffic part-time. You get weather. There's some limitations, but you get weather. But it's a synthetic vision in an emergency you could use. And this is me practicing with no navigation except the iPad on an instrument approach. In an emergency, could you fly down to the runway? Absolutely. Now, it is a practice approach. So at this point, hey, they say, hey, go out and make a base leg. This is when we go visual. But I want you to look at the iPad. It really does take you all the way down to the runway in an emergency if you have to. So, for really cheap, super great emergency insurance, even if you buy the best of everything, the Mini 4 with 128 gigs, and the Pro, and the Stratus that's $900, they're $1,700. And I know that's a little pricey, but it's about $22,000 cheaper than installing a GTN with a 330 ES transponder with a GDL88 and paying a monthly XM subscription for traffic and weather. Now, the GTN system, for about $25,000 installed, will be legal for primary form navigation all the time. However, an electrical failure is out of there. So you're going to need a certified GPS if you fly IFR sooner than later. VORs are being turned off. Even high altitude ones like Seal Beach are being turned off. So you're really going to need this for instrument flying no matter what. You can go get an old Garmin 300 and put that in. Hey, that's great. But in an emergency, the ForeFlight with synthetic vision is just awesome. Now, you've spent all this money getting this beautiful iPad, and then you lose it. There's a really simple way to double or triple your chances of getting this thing back. And that is, whenever you have the lock screen showing, you should have a picture that you've taken. And on our website, there's a downloadable form where you can take a picture with your name and your email and make it your lock screen. And there are instructions on how to do this. Now, on my iPhone, I have a different person, Jenny, from the 80s song 8675309, and I always use my iCloud email. Why do I have different information on my iPhone? Because they can't call me, and my Apple email I can check from any computer in the world as long as I've got internet. Let's talk about some account options. The only important really thing to do is you push more and then you push accounts. Is under account logins, completely ignore the CSC duots and just have ForeFlight. ForeFlight actually has an agreement with Lockheed Martin where they pay them that when you get weather briefing and flight planning through the ForeFlight servers, you can actually open and close flight plans direct from the iPad. You can get your instrument expected clearances directly through the iPad, and you can even get in-flight notifications, so it's definitely worth it. So if we go to downloads, click on United States, and scroll up, I'm going to select the state that applies to me, which is California. And I'm only going to download that state for this example. Now if I go back, I've got 21 downloads. Let's close out ForeFlight. And you can see I've got that alert button even with the program closed. So we'll open up ForeFlight, go back to more, click downloads again, scroll up, and you've got all these downloads to get, VFR, IFR, and that's stuff I've selected to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick one and download California. And the way I just do one is I just touch that bar. Now at this point, I'm only getting the taxi diagrams and the AFD. Great. Now I only have 20 more. But you don't have to do them one at a time. If you're on a nice high-speed internet connection, just scroll up. You don't even have to scroll up to see it. But instead of doing one at a time, just push the download button, and that'll download all of them, and it'll buffer them out and sequence a couple at a time. And we're going to skip that because it's going to take a few minutes even on really fast Wi-Fi. And remember, I've only downloaded. Remember, that was a key term from the beginning. Download meaning it's stored on my iPad. Now, connected to the internet, it can see anything in the US. So I've flight planned while I was on the internet this trip to Needles, which is still in California. Unfortunately, when I get to Needles, they have problems where the airport is closed. I'm low on fuel. I'm tired. I need to pee and get another Red Bull. So I'm going to divert to Laughlin, which has casinos and they sell Red Bull and all this cool stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and hold on the Laughlin airport and I'll get a pop-up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the More button to the right of IFP. And then I'm going to push the blue Details button. And it shows me weather from an hour and 40 minutes ago. Why? Because that's the last time it got weather. I didn't buy the Stratus, and the weather I'm getting is not updated. It's what I got at the flight school before I left. That's why you need the Stratus too. Then I'm going to click on Info and go, gee, the weather's not very good when I actually listen to it. So I've listened to the ATIS, and man, the weather is 1500 overcast. I'm going to need to do an instrument approach. So let's pull up the plate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just scroll up with my finger, put my finger near the other frequencies button, and just scroll up to the top. And then I'm going to touch the approach button. And then I'm going to touch the RNAV 34 approach. And it ain't there, because I didn't download Arizona. Well, I tell air traffic control, I'm sorry, I don't have the procedure. And they say, well, just get on this Victor Airway. So I changed my map to IFR, and wow, I don't even have the Victor Airways. That's why it's really critical to make sure everything you need is downloaded before you go. If you're going anywhere near a border of a state, you need to download that other state too. And again, that's why you really need a 64 gig Apple device, because there's nothing wrong with carrying every state in the US if you fly something fast. I typically carry 3 states with me at all times. Another cool thing ForeFlight will do is a weight and balance. So what we'll do is let's just demonstrate how to put in a new plane and do a quick weight and balance. So I'm going to touch weight and balance. I'm going to add the button top right. I'm going to type in a tail number, November 1482 Yankee. Hit next. Now it's already discovered that it's a float plane option. I said, no, it's not a float plane. And the reason it came up with all this is because it talked to the FAA registry. So I'll put in the empty weight, and then I'll put in the moment from my POH weight and balance. Click next. It says, hey, we did our best, go check it out. So I'll touch 1482 Yankee at the bottom. Even got my serial number, that's pretty cool. Wow, that just looks wrong. There's a red warning at the top. You're out of balance before you do anything. And if you look at the notices, the CG is too far forward. The empty aircraft CG or moment in setup may have been put in by me incorrectly. Well, I did what the POH says. Let me look. Touch the setup button. Scroll up. Moments 54.5. That's what my weight and balance says. But let's look in the weight and balance anyway. 54.5. I did it right. Oh, wait a minute. That was the true moment divided by 1,000, and that's not what ForeFlight is asking for. This is the most common mistake people make when setting up their own aircraft in ForeFlight. I need to change that to the real number, 54,500. So I'll touch moment, change that to 54,500. Hey, that looks better. Click done. Or save in that case. Now I'm going to touch load. Let's put in a pilot. Put in a co-pilot. Let's put 43 gallons of gas in there. Save. Overweight. Oh, the fuel tanks don't actually hold that much. Sorry, I was used to my other plane. Let's change that. Top off on 8 Yankee is only 36 gallons. See, it'll protect you from doing the wrong things. Done. Now, what I'm going to do is scroll up and put in my in-flight consumption. And this is something you get from your flight plan. And I'm going to fly, 3.5 hours, so I'll count that as 24 gallons. Save, and look, a perfect weight and balance, including takeoff and landing. 91-103 says you are legally required to have done this before every single flight. Most people do weight and balances before every single flight because the paper weight and balance is hard. This is really easy, but again, you got to make sure you're trained and you know how to set up the airplane. Once you set it up, it goes really, really easy. So if we move on to airports, and that's the bottom left button, there's a lot of information. Let's go through it kind of quick. If I push on the clock button, that brings up all the recent airports I've looked at. If I push it again, that list will go away. If I push on browse, I can search by states. So I'll search California, and then I'll pick Agua Dulce. That'll bring Agua Dulce info up. If I click the recent button, I can then go back to Long Beach. If I click the star button, you'll notice Long Beach is added to the favorites on the left. And if I push it again, it will remove it. If I touch that little balloon marker, I can say, show me where Long Beach Airport is on a map. And it'll show it for you. Now that little blue dot to the right, right above Disneyland, inside the Disneyland TFR, is me. That's where I'm recording this movie. I'm actually in my Anaheim house. I actually live right inside the Disney TFR. Now if we go back, if I touch that nearby button, it'll say my nearest airport is Fullerton Municipal. Okay? But then there's another nearby button. If I touch that, it says the nearest airport is Seal Beach. Well, wait a minute, I'm confused. What's the difference between the two nearby buttons? Well, the nearby button in the corner, the top right, is the nearest airport to my position. That circle with the target or hash marks on it looks like a little sniper scope. It says, where am I? So that's the nearest airport to my present position. The nearby labeled text button on airports is showing the nearest airports to that airport, and that's the difference. Let's go back to airports. If I touch on the thumbnail, I'll get just a quick review with some of the FBOs. But if I touch the taxiway button, I can get an actual legal airport diagram that is geo-referenced. And that's the little blue moving airplane. So remember the difference. One is just a thumbnail, and another is a legal airport diagram. 91-103, you have to have a taxi diagram out when you move an airplane at a towered airport. Everyone's like, what? This is new. No, 91-103 has never changed. If you taxi at a towered airport without a taxiway diagram in front of you, and you have a runway incursion, or you get in trouble, it's going to be an additional penalty. It's important that you have one of these out. That's why ForeFlight, FlyQ, and all the electronic flight bag programs make it much better. So what's that geo-reference thing? Well, the nice thing is if you're moving and you've paid for the Pro version, you get geo-referencing, including visual and auditory warnings as you move. Hey, you're getting close. Hey, you're on a runway. Hey, you're getting close. Now, I'm in a run-up area, but you notice I get those geo-reference warnings even if I'm looking at a different map or a different approach plate. This helps protect you against runway incursions, and it really is a great thing. And not only is it a visual, but if you hook it up to your headset or to your audio panel, it actually talks to you and gives you audio warnings as well. We go back, we touch comments. The remarks are the remarks inside an AFD. The comments are what other people, pilots, put in. Somebody likes pilot safety on Facebook. I think they're great. FBOs, this is a great button. Now, I fly some occasional bigger stuff where, I'm getting a lot of gas. So I pull up the FBOs and then I sit there and call them. And I call up Signature and say, hey, Signature, I'm going to be bringing in a caravan. I'm going to need, a couple 100 gallons. And ForeFlight has gas right now for 670, or Jet A for 590. Will you beat it? And they go, well, yeah, we're 580. And I go, okay, great. Then I'll call ForeFlight and go, hey, ForeFlight, I'm going to bring in a caravan and need a couple 100 gallons of Jet A. And Signature says they'll sell it to me for 580. And they go, oh, well, we'll beat it. We'll make it 570. I just get them in a bidding war against each other, and I love that. But it's also good that you can kind of pick the FBO you're going to. Important before you go to the FBO is make sure the price is current and make sure they actually have the gas you want. So if you click on Mercury, there is no Mercury. Now it's called Flight Serve, and the prices are even better. So make sure you call them. Fixed-based operators also include, if you scroll up, flight schools and even maintenance stuff. If we click on frequencies, it'll show all these different tabs. Just because it's in ForeFlight does not mean it's true. ForeFlight's only going to show you information that you had of current as of your last download. Even if you have the current download, but the FAA has noted something is a change, that may not work. For instance, if I then click on the NOTAMs button, 2465 is inoperative and has been for a very long time. Let's click on weather. It'll automatically show you the METAR. Let's click on winds aloft. Click on runways. Bunches of information. Let's click on procedures. And that'll take you into the instrument procedures. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I can also click on hotspots. I can click on departures. If I click on the Anaheim 3, it's a little bit easier to read if you just lock it on portrait. Now, departure procedures are never geo-referenced. Arrivals. Let's click on the alternate minimums. See that little grayed out button? You need to swipe to the right to get to that. There's my filing as an alternate minimums. I go back to airports. Let's look at the KO4 arrival. Again, never geo-referenced. And the reason you can't overlay these on maps, and the reason they're never geo-referenced, no matter what subscription you buy, is because they're not drawn to scale, and ForeFlight has no way of converting that, and that's why. Let's go back to the approaches. Let's pick on an ILS. You see that green saved button? That means it's stored in your computer even when you're not on the internet. And look, shows even where I am, still on that Disneyland TFR. If you've taken instrument training or you're an instrument instructor, you'll know the hardest thing for people to get good at when they're new is knowing where they are on the instrument approach plate. It's a failure in situational awareness, and it causes a lot of problems. Well, it's pretty easy to get lost if you got a little blue moving airplane. So this is really why it's so much better to use electronic flight bags like ForeFlight or FlightQ. And WingX and Garmin, and they all do the same thing. All right, let's click on Other. Click on the land and hold short operations. And those are the land and hold short points. Let's go back. We've already clicked on the NOTAMs once. But let's click on, or let's just scroll up. Read through those. Let's click on TFRs. Looks like Blue Angels. The Blue Angels are practicing down in El Centro. And if I scroll up, there's my permanent temporary flight restriction over Disneyland. If I click on the Air Route Traffic Control Centers, or LA Centers, it's got some NOTAMs, stuff about drones. Let's click on Services. This is great because I can figure out if I'm going to spend the night, how to get to the hotels. If I click on AFD, I can actually read the FAA AFD as long as my downloads are current. Now this is a scroll up. Even when you get to something that says the next page, just keep scrolling up and you can read all about it. If I click on More, that'll give me even more stuff. Let's talk about the maps. The map button is the second on the bottom. I actually like the world view when I first look at TFRs because they stand out better. They're easier to see. Remember, yellow TFRs are going to be active more than 24 hours from now, and red TFRs either are active or will be active in the next 24 hours. I then go to a street view. Remember, as a private pilot or any visual flying, I don't care if you're an ATP, when you are VFR, your primary form of navigation must legally be pilotage. That's look out the window and look for a landmark, like the 91 freeway, which runs just north of that red TFR. So I know if I stay north of the 91, I won't go through the Disney TFR. Let's change that to a sectional map. Now, you'll notice there's no button for terminal or world aeronautical charts. Those automatically appear when you zoom in or zoom out. I don't ever download the WAC charts because I never want to look at something that big. The maximum zoom I'm ever going to do is a sectional layer. So the way you get to a terminal chart is, let's just move over to Catalina. And if you zoom in, you'll actually see the break. There's a terminal and there's a sectional. If we look over by John Wayne, that's a sectional view. If I zoom in, you can again see the broken lines of where the terminal and the sectional don't quite add up. You want an IFR low map? There you go. You want an IFR high map? There you go, but it's even going to warn you, this map has not been downloaded. So when you go into El Paso in the Premier Jet and you try and show off for your co-pilot and you get no map like I did one day, this is why. So that's VFR and AirMets. Now you can see the AirMets, they're pretty grayed out because I have them pretty light, but you can make them darker. Orange is turbulence or winds, blue is freezing, gray is IFR, yellow is convective activity, thunderstorms and stuff like that. And if you just touch one, you'll get the information. I can overlay radar. So this is a sectional map with flight rules. So the red dot is IFR, the blue dots are marginal VFR, the green dots are VFR, and the pink dot over Catalina is you shouldn't be flying, it's low IFR, and it's overlaid by radar. And the radar legend's pretty simple. Radar's pretty easy to read. Green is light rain, go for it. Yellow is slow down and think about this, and red is stop. Just treat radar like a stop light. You shouldn't be in red, I don't care what you're flying. Yellow is you better have some real good equipment and you better be trying to get away from it. Green, go for it. Pink or blue, bad, bad, bad. Just call it a day. And there's another legend that you can look at. So if we look at winter weather, pink is ice storms, freezing rain. Nobody flies into this stuff intentionally. Blue is snow, heavy snow. Again, not the thing you want to be in a 172. Now if we look at a sectional chart with temperatures, that's the temperature in Celsius, and look at my home in Big Bear today, you'll notice it's -3. Yeah, it's a little chilly in Big Bear. Hopefully getting a little bit of snow right now. Catalina is nice, warm, balmy 6 degrees. And if you look to the top, just above El Monte, which is 8 degrees, you'll see another airport with -2. Now if I show the dew point, that is not the actual dew point. That is the dew point spread. That's why yellow, a low temperature dew point spread, means low clouds and fog. So green is VFR, blue is marginal VFR, and you notice I've changed over to visibility. Red is IFR, and remember, anything pink, what the heck are you doing? You shouldn't be there. You're not even getting in on an instrument approach. Low IFR, 0 visibility. I don't care what you're flying, you're not getting there. And I'm pretty sure the airlines with Autoland don't land at Catalina. There's some wind barbs. There's the ceiling. Remember, the ceiling is always bases above ground level. The bases at Big Bear are not at 600 feet. They're at 600 feet above ground level. It's never the tops. The only way you can get cloud tops are through PIREPs or radar summary charts. There's a lot of overcast with the occasional broken. And all the way to the right of the screen, you'll see clear. Here's some icing PIREPs. Some turbulence PIREPs. Here's a PIREP that's urgent. It says an unreliable airman, urgently, that's what UUA means, is a scared unreliable airman, pardon me, over the LAX VOR at 0234 Zulu at 100 feet in a 757. Low level wind shear. They lost 15 knots of indicated airspeed during the descent. Yeah, that's pretty urgent. That would keep me out of the way too. Some low lead gas prices, and you notice it's cheaper over in my home of Big Bear than it is my home of Long Beach. That's very true. These are flight rules. You see everything is kind of green except for a couple blue dots in the top left corner, and that's marginal VFR. Marginal VFR, I'm going to get on a personal opinion. Sandbox for a second. I don't do marginal VFR. I don't do special VFR. It's either more than 3 miles or I'm going IFR. It's just not worth the risk, but that's my opinion. Now, settings, if I touch that little sheriff's badge in the corner, I can make satellite, radar, and everything else darker by sliding that satellite opacity button all the way to the right. And you'll notice I get this nice gray haze over it. Let's talk about the easiest way to plan a flight. There are 2 ways. There's drag and drop, or just put it all in at the top. It is really, really smart. ForeFlight is amazing. If you just put everything, and I do mean everything, in the search bar, it will calculate everything for you. So I'm going to type Long Beach to the Special Flight Rules area to Camarillo. My tail number altitude 4,500 feet at 18 gallons per hour at 115 knots. Now I'll put in my tail number, November 4941 Foxtrot. I don't have to put knots or gallons or feet because it absolutely gets that 4-digit numbers are always your altitude, 2-digit numbers are always your fuel burn, and 3-digit numbers are always your airspeed. Now, if I just hit the search button, there it is. And all of that data is in there. It'll ask me to pack, get current information just for those 2 airports, just for that route of flight. This does not count as a legal weather briefing. This is only fuel prices, no TAMs, and a little bit of weather. Instead of doing pack, and you can always pack and that's fine, look to the right of airport no TAMs, there's a blue pause button. Look to the right, there's a star, and there's a box with an arrow. You want to touch that and hit brief, file and brief, and then hit brief, because that will get you the legally required standard weather brief. When are you required to get a complete and full standard weather brief? Anytime you're leaving your airport's traffic pattern. Yeah, if you're going from Long Beach to Torrance, which is 2 minutes, you must legally get a full and complete standard weather brief. It's not new, it's 91.103. So let's touch it. Problem is it's hard to call and take a bunch of notes, or it's hard to read 56 pages of duets. Well, with the new Graphical briefing, with their partnership with Lockheed Martin, it's pretty easy to check it out. There's a closed runway. If we touch the next one, there's another closed runway. If I touch AirMets, it shows me the AirMet. Now this is green because it's not active during my passing time. If I touch mountain obscuration AirMets at the bottom left, the red ones are the ones that are active during my passing times. And it draws it on the map and has all the information. And it's just easier for me to read the raw text, which is why I always touch show raw text. Touch the icing and look, there's some AirMet Zulus. Again, I've got 2 red ones active during my time of flight. Looks like they've got ice between 8,000 and 270. I'll touch turbulence low AirMets. There's 2 AirMets, but not active during my planned flight. Let's look at high AirMets. There is a red one, active during my time, but I'm taking the 206. I'm not getting to 24,000 feet. I'll look at the synopsis. Pretty easy to read standard weather map. And read through the details. I'll touch METARs. Shows them visually. Now the cool thing is, after I read all those, I can keep scrolling up and go to my destination. And this is a kind of a pro tip for you. If you scroll up to your destination and touch the time clock to the left, it'll show you the last 3 so you can see how fast weather is changing. Here's the area forecast. Here's some TAFs. And the green bar is my time of route. Now it looks like near Camarillo, it's going to be marginal VFR. With light rain showers broken at 25. Okay, I'm going to have to go in IFR. So I did my VFR flight plan. I'm going to go ahead and look at the winds aloft. My departure NOTAMs. This is a lot of information, but you are legally required to read through it. Believe me, it's easier with the graphical than the 56-page legacy briefing or do-outs, which you can still view, but you do need to understand this information before every single flight. I know a lot of people don't do it, but there's a lot of accidents and a lot of pilot certificates that have been suspended and in rare circumstances revoked because people did not get the standard weather briefing. So there's one thing about, hey, you got it. There's another thing about you actually reading all of it. Got some destination NOTAMs. Looks like some drone stuff near Camarillo. I'll look at the en route navigation NOTAMs next. Well, actually, I want to stay on Camarillo. It looks like DME is required because the Fillmore VOR was out of service. Now there's some en route navigation NOTAMs. Bunch of stuff out of service at LAX. The Fillmore VOR is out of service. Some communication NOTAMs. Some service NOTAMs. Looks like the HIWAS on the VOR is out of service. And EFOS 122.0 has been closed forever, if you didn't know. There's some obstruction NOTAMs that we can read about. Some airspace NOTAMs. Now I'm just flipping through here pretty quick. You actually do need to read through there. What I do is I always get a standard weather brief on ForeFlight, or I actually use the Lockheed Martin computer service, which I like even better. And then after I read through it, I then call the weather briefer in person and say, got a couple questions. Hey, I saw an abbreviation I don't understand, or I see a NOTAM that I don't quite understand. Will you explain it to me? There's some military NOTAMs. Everything at Los Al is broken, apparently. Point Magoo's got a couple things. Let's look at FTC NOTAMs. FTC NOTAMs are instrument approach and instrument charts. That's typically what an FTC NOTAM is. Can also be State Department NOTAMs, stuff about crossing the border, stuff about being blinded by a solar power plant. And remember, please don't circle power plants, dams, refineries, etc. Click on Uncategorized NOTAMs. A couple things that couldn't fit in anywhere else. Look for some cyclones. Convective outlooks. Looks like I'll probably be okay. Then if you touch legacy briefing, that's the full 56 pages of do-out stuff that you're used to. All right. Now, based on that information, I've understood that VFR is not a good idea. This is why I always get a brief before I file. Now when I go back, I don't think a VFR flight into 25-foot overcast with light rain is a really good idea. So I'm going to go back, get rid of the special flight rules area, and all I'm going to do is just touch it with my finger and drag it off the screen. Then I'm going to touch routes and select the Coastal November 24 Tower and Route IFR. And look, it automatically changed it to an IFR flight plan It automatically changed it to the IFR altitude, and it loaded the tower en route clearance that's stored in the AFD. I'm going to go ahead and load my procedure. I'm going to hit approach. I want to do the RNAV Zulu. Looks like my route of flight will take me nearest to Swana. So I'll touch Swana IAF. Add to route. Close. And look, it even put the instrument approach plate on the map. I think that'll work pretty good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and file that. So file and brief. It's an IFR flight plan. Everything's correct. And I'll go ahead and change my time though from 11:55 a.m. to 4:55 p.m. or 4:45. Then I'll hit file. Oh, sorry. Guess I should probably put in some fuel. Make sure my flight notifications are turned on. Then I'll touch file. Do I really want to file? Yep. Poof. It says OK. It was filed. Great. Now, I'm going to wait a few minutes, go back to the maps, and then if I wait just a couple more minutes while I'm packing some information, it'll say, hey, here's the IFR clearance you're going to get. You want it? Yeah, I do. I'll hit yes, hit OK, and it will automatically load the same thing I'd already had into the map. This is great because it gives you a chance to write down your IFR clearance before you call clearance delivery. Let's just put that procedure back in. Remember, hit approach, RNAV Zulu, Swana, add to route, close, and my IFR plate's back on the map. Okay, we've gone really fast. You've been really good trying to not keep up with me. At this point, go ahead and turn on your iPhone or turn on your iPad, turn on ForeFlight, and hold it vertically with something in the portrait mode. And I'm going to show you how to add that special flight rules custom waypoint. Let's start with the iPhone. If you have an iPhone, touch the menu button, scroll up until you find the user waypoints, and touch the user waypoint button. If you have an iPad, again holding it vertically, all the way on the bottom right you'll see more with ... touch that. And then touch user waypoints. Okay, now whether you're on an iPhone or an iPad, it's going to look the same. Touch anywhere next to name and put in this, SFRA. Now let's touch the description bar and put a little comment in there. Special flight rules area, LAX, SFRA, put in whatever you want. Good. Now touch where it says latitude and put in this exactly with no spaces. Sierra Mike Oscar / 1 tree 2 Romeo / 8. So what we're telling is we want to put a mark on the Santa Monica 132 radial 8 miles southeast of it, which that's the special flight rules. Special flight rules area is based on the Santa Monica 132 radial, and 8 miles will put you just south of LAX. I just know that through experience, but you can figure it out by looking at a map. So remember, no spaces, exactly as shown. Sierra Mike Oscar / 1 tree 2 Romeo / 8. Then we're going to click the Done button in the top right. Now, touch that bar, and it will show you where it is on the map. Great, now let's use it in a flight plan. Up at the top in the search bar, you see SFRA, your custom waypoint. Tap next to that on the right, put a space, and make sure it says this exactly. Sierra Foxtrot Romeo Alpha, 1 space, Sierra Mike Oscar. I want it to draw a line from the Special Flight Rules area, lower boundary, to the Santa Monica VOR. Poof! You've now drawn in the Special Flight Rules area. It is never legal as primary form of navigation. It's a handheld device, guys. And I don't think declaring an emergency to go through a VFR corridor is really going to work for you. A lot of people, when the Santa Monica VOR was out of service for 3 months, were going up and down all day with no radial using handheld devices and cheerfully announcing their tail numbers to everybody at the LAX FISDO. It's a really bad idea. The only way you could do this if the Santa Monica VOR was out of service legally is if you had a certified panel mount GPS with a current database. ForeFlight's more accurate than the VOR, but it cannot replace it as primary forms of navigation. But I got to tell you, it's really nice situational awareness. All right, everybody take a break. Put that iPad down. Hide it from yourself. Now let's talk about an easier way to flight plan, and that's just the drag and drop method if you're familiar with your route. So let's just pull up the map page. We got a blank search box at the top, and I'll just type in KLGB to my house in Big Bear, Lima Tree 5. Search, straight line. Now I know if I grab my first active segment, that pink line, and drag it over to the 91605, touching waypoints, VPLFX is the 91605. I'm always going to start there. Then if I just scroll to the right and drag my inactive segment, the blue bar, down to the Paradise VOR, that keeps me clear of all the LAX Bravo. Touch nav, touch the Paradise VOR. And if I zoom up to Big Bear, you're always supposed to enter Big Bear of the dam, so I can just grab that blue line and drag it to the edge of the lake, where I've stored under waypoints some custom waypoints like the Big Bear Dam. Ta-da! That looks like a complete route. Now if I just touch procedure, traffic pattern into Lima 35, runway 26 is the one default, left traffic on a 45, add that to the route, hit close, and it even draws in my traffic pattern for me. Pretty easy way to do it. And that's how most people stop. They do that, and then they blast off without getting the standard weather briefing, and that's where it can get you in trouble. But it's a very simple, quick way of doing things. All right, let's talk about the instrument plates, and this is stars, DPs, and approach plates. Actually, you know what? Let's stop for a second. Before I do that, let's look over at the documents. I'm sorry. I'm just messing things up. That slide shouldn't have been there. Let's go ahead and stay in plates. If I just touch add a plate here, and then I'm going to pick Santa Barbara. And then I'm just going to scroll up and start touching stuff. I touch the ILS, it appears. If I touch the airport diagram, it'll appear. Now, the cool thing about instrument approach plates is you can highlight and mark them up in ForeFlight. So here's some tools, and I do this on all my plates. So I'm going to touch the line button. I've selected 23 point red, kind of transparent, and I'm just going to start highlighting stuff, like the Santa Monica VOR frequency, and my final approach course, and all the other stuff I normally mark up. Then I change it to a darker line, make the font I want, make sure my font is centered, and I'll put a big giant T over my final approach fix, time, turn, twist, throttle, talk, and I'll put 920 as my final altitude inside of it. The more you mark up the charts, the less work you have to do while flying. So highlighting stuff like this is what I used to do on paper. It's what I teach all my students to do because it takes all the work out of it. If you just look at the map, I can do everything I need to do just by looking up at the map, not bouncing up and down. Then I'm going to click Done. Then I'm going to click that forward button, click Send to Map. And look, all my notes are there. Then I'm going to click on that little sheriff's button. That's my brightness. Make sure my plate is all the way dark. And there's my approach plate. You'll notice I always overlay approach plates on VFR maps. I don't ever fly IFR on the IFR maps because in an emergency, the VFR charts have much more information. So this is just my personal preference. Now we can go over to the documents. So there's my documents, and I can just kind of scroll up through them. Look at all those free textbooks that you never have to buy again. Then I'm going to touch Add Document. FAA. And I want to scroll up and add the stuff I really need, like the Southwest AFD supplemental. Those are the IFR tower and route stuff that you need to have. And let's add some Los Angeles Class B enhancement graphics. And let's add some Los Angeles fly charts, which is the chart on the back for pilotage. Scroll through all those free textbooks. And I need to add the Los Angeles tax supplemental. This is required for you to have because it shows the Bravo routes, including the special flight rules area, which again, as it says, is on the Santa Monica 132 radial. Remember, you're required to have this chart with you in the plane if you're going through the special flight rules area. That's the exception to written charts for most GA. All right, let's talk about the hazard advisor, which is really terrain awareness. If you see something yellow, it does not mean you're safe. I teach mountain flying, and I got to tell you, being 102 feet above terrain with mountain downdrafts up to 2,000 feet per minute is not a good idea. Yellow means you're in danger, and you could be 101 feet above it or 999. Either way, you're not safe. Yellow means you should execute a climb. Red means you're about to crash and you need to execute an emergency climb. Do not fly in the mountains, especially at night, relying on terrain awareness. It's just not a good idea. But let me show you how it looks. So if I'm taking off out of Fullerton, as soon as I rotate and start climbing, everything on the planet turns red. Yes, it's okay, I'm going to keep climbing. And then stuff turns yellow. Except the big red high intensity light off my right wing, which is that goofy KFI tower. And as I turn back downwind, stuff starts fading away. Remember, anywhere near yellow terrain does not mean you're safe. coming back from Camarillo one day on an instrument flight lesson. My student was under the hood, and I said, looking at the yellow terrain, do you think you're safe? He said, absolutely. Now, I'm VFR flight following. My student is flying the airplane, and I'm taking pictures with my camera while a flight instructor in the back is looking for traffic. You're really not as safe as you think. One good downdraft, and it's all over. So remember, yellow does not mean you're safe. Yellow means you need to climb if you can. So when can you use the iPad as your sole source of navigation? When the electrical panel goes out. So I'm flying along. My plan is from Long Beach to Corona. I'm at night. I'm VFR. Very little moonlight. I've been vectored south, apparently over my house, when the electrical panel completely fails. Okay, not a problem. I'm going to touch the Santa Ana Airport below me, hit more, and hit direct to. Then I'm going to press and hold it again, touch more, details. There's the current weather, touch info, load my approach plate. Let's do the ILS, touch the map, poof, it's on the map. Now I'm going to touch the route button, touch procedure, approach, ILS, always load it from the initial approach fix, hit add to route, pull out my handheld radio, get SoCal approach, and say, I'm having a major emergency, and I need vectors for the ILS Santa Ana. They say, not a problem, and let's start heading that way. Now, the only reason I've got red X's on my synthetic vision is because I shot this screen sitting in my office, and I'm not moving. That's why it's got that red screen. But remember the movie I showed you earlier. So that's how you use it in an emergency. And remember, every time I teach an instrument flying course, every time I teach an iPad course, I always make people shoot instrument approaches using ForeFlight only so they know how to if they can in an emergency. Y'all, we're almost done, but let's do a quick quiz. True or false? All IFR plates are geo-referenced if you have a Pro subscription. Meh. False. Approaches and taxi diagrams only. If your downloads are current, they're saved on the iPad. Remember, SIDS and stars are never geo-referenced because they're not drawn to scale. And remember, geo-references on the instrument approach plates and the taxi plates require the Pro subscription. Is that true or false? Well, that's true. Taxi diagrams and terrain awareness, the hazard avoidance awareness system, are Pro subscription only. True or false? You've now done a very fast 2-hour FAA Wings credit class, and true or false, you now feel safe to use ForeFlight? Well, probably not. Although I hope you've learned a lot and I hope you've had some fun. I teach another class which you can watch for free anytime you want on pilotsafety.org. Go on videos, scroll down through all the free ones on the left, and there's a recording of 10 ways people get in trouble and have accidents with iPads. One inspector in the Long Beach FSDO actually told me that he hates iPads because people with iPads and handhelds are causing 10 times more airspace and TFR violations and problems than ever before with paper charts. And it always comes back to one big rule. They just don't know how to use it. They just don't know how to use the thing. I just did remedial training for the FAA for a guy with a G1000 who violated Bravo airspace. He didn't know how to use it. It's important, whether you're flying G1000 or ForeFlight, that you get a lot more training than a couple free wings classes and reading a quick start guide or watching anything on YouTube. we do offer an 8-hour DVD set. Much of what I just covered, but a whole lot more and much, much slower. If you go on pilotsafety.org, you can order these DVDs. They actually pay for all the free work we do all over the country, but it's not this class. It is much, much slower, where we go through every button and every feature step by step. You're not supposed to watch it on a computer. You're supposed to watch it in a normal DVD player in your living room or your bedroom, and you're supposed to sit there with your iPad, and we go so slow that you do every little button push with us. It's designed for you to do it along. That's why it's 8 hours and there's over 3 DVDs. Of course, if you'd like to work with me, I'd love to work with you anywhere in the country. I'll come to you, or you can come to us. My paid job is over at Master Flight Training, and I do iPad classes. To get Wings credit for watching today, if you would just email me, Gary R. at pilotsafety.org, your name and the fact that you're a Ventura County 99s person, I'll email you back a 10-question quiz. It's real super easy, multiple guess. Circle the answers, send it back to me. As long as you get more than 70%, I can prove you kind of watched the program. Then I'll check with the Ventura County 99s, and if they say, yeah, you're a member and you were reserved for this class, then we'll get you Wings credit. So remember, if you want Wings credit for this, please email me, and then I'll start the process. Even if you just have a question, you can email me anytime you want. I hope that it's been fun. I hope that you've learned a lot. I know we moved really quick, but we had to. And I hope I'll see you again either in a live class or on a video soon. Thanks again. I'm Gary for pilotsafety.org.